person up will be Lawrence Brenner, and I'm going to be sharing because he just gave me a title slide to have, and then he's going to talk over it. So 1 second while I pull that up. Should be this one. And all right. I'm good here. Are you good, Lawrence?
Yes, I am. Now,
All right.
everyone can
You
hear
can
me?
go whenever you're ready then.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Now, one of the things is, as soon as Randy puts it up on the screen, is that you'll actually see what I'm talking about this afternoon, well, afternoon East Coast time, is visual novels in the age of mobile. Now, that's, as we've seen, obviously, with the high impact of Mystic Messenger and several other titles, is one of the highest growing markets and also potential sources of innovation for the entire visual novel medium. So, and that's why I want to say that visual novel is a kind of medium, just like sequential art, comics, etc., are a medium for expression. Same thing pretty much with visual novels, is that it's basically for the flow context of that it's more heavily text-based and interactions with not exactly as much straightforward, active, button mashing kind of gameplay, which you can even have on mobile devices as well. But in addition to this, you can have quite a number of very interesting things happen, such as inputs from the phone themselves, such as if there were things for certain visual novels that dealt with fitness, activity, etc., you would have things that take in stuff from certain APIs and then actually have it pulled and plugged into an actual visual novel itself, creating a whole nother set of mechanics and choices that would actually be part of something specific that would happen in game, because a lot of the thing has to deal with the narrative. The same with having things of AR, such as from Pokemon Go, actually being applied inside visual novels, with AR and location-based services to be additional things that could be added in terms of the choices and interactions that you can actually do with visual novel characters. So let's think about some of that in the terms of development and how this should be going forward. Because as we know, a lot of different things for the visual novel has been heavily on consoles and some mobiles, such as things for like Nintendo DS and the Vita and everything like that. And now, actually, with the Switch announcement, we can actually see the visual novel also not just being from the console with the Switch, but also as this parts that you could actually go with it. Now we actually have to see what the inputs for the Switch would be as well, because the Switch itself, I would say, is a form of mobile gaming as well. Like I said, with the third-party peripherals or whatever, things all get plugged into it. That's something to think about. But for the most part, we'll focus mostly on mobile phones and the inputs that you can actually get from mobile phones and associated devices, like I said, for fitness, such as Fitbit and whatever APIs would be applicable for these kind of things. In addition, the other different sensors that exist inside phones, such as accelerometers and all things of this nature, pretty much anything you notice if you play stuff like Pokemon Go or something like that, where it actually deal or interact with particular things. Now, this would actually add something for how you could be able to interact in somewhat aspects of more, I'd say, of certain RPG aspects, but location-based RPG, where you could possibly interact with the characters and make choices and decisions, while not in the stated active modes, but still being able to be passive and doing particular things as in the visual novel kind of things. And like I said, passive is more defined as not the massive button mashing or continuously active content, but just how you would play particular things, such as being having certain aspects that have been crossed with other things, such as having certain skill-based things or particular things of playing instruments or something else that's associated with like certain branches in visual novel things or aspects that are also incorporated into other games, such as you've seen in like Persona and things of that nature. For example, for something with AR or particular things, as most people know, that Fate's Stay actually started as visual novels, so it's actually something like you could have interactions with certain things actually occurring in different locations where you could meet some of the other characters that are fighting against your chosen person and character. So if you want to have Saber interact with Gilgamesh, it could be as actually you're going around in the different things, and the interaction could happen there, sometimes with like a location-based kind of thing. This is similar to some of like the timed interactions that you actually would see already existing in certain visual novel aspects, but with the phone already on and it being a continuously on device, that actually changes with some of the aspects of how the visual novel itself and the characters could interact with you, because it would do things at times where you wouldn't be set already logged into the games, such as that happens a bit with Mystic Messenger. Just putting it all together to have like the different inputs, because it's an always on device as opposed to something that you would be logged into continuously. Now let's determine with some of the other aspects that could actually go through for the content that would exist in visual novels with how phones and mobile things work. So as was stated, like in the beginning of this entire conference, that for the most part, with things as flip phones and stuff like that, even though Japan always had a high amount of phone interaction, even such as payment systems and things of that nature, it didn't obviously lend itself to the full interactive and colorful displays that exist in, well, the majority of smartphones now, such as anything from Apple as well as, well, pretty much anything Android. They come with great screens, audio, video content, things like that. And this too also opens up how people would be able to interact and the content they could have, such as making sure that it's beyond even some of the older quality generations of visual novels, where it has, like, the high content, fully acted and everything like that, with resplendent graphics. So, but also because things are being done with phones, you can also think about how this could affect the entire process of monetization. So this also, like we see with Mystic Messenger and other titles, is that there's in-app purchases and things of this nature to help advance into the game, but not necessarily make it more difficult to play or add too much of unfair or uncompetitive advantage to like other players, because it would add a different way of revenue and monetization sources that can actually help in developers create more content and also create further content inside and outside the game, such as with the location-based services and also the time-based things. This adds yet another way that, since you can actually run off the particulars of the phone sensors, data, and everything itself, adds more content that people could interact, deal with, and do things with, as we see with like many different kinds of things for logging in, interaction, things like that. These are all things that would work more because these are always, phone is more or less an always-on device. So that's one particular aspect of dealing with this. Now, an expansion, because things are also mobile phones, is that the visual novel itself can be part of a larger kind of media campaign for even different styles and sets of games, such as we see like there's different kind of games that plug into aspects of other games, such as like you see things that would work in promo or in concert. You could see this with some of the World of Warcraft apps that actually deal with things inside World of Warcraft. You could have actual visual novels that would add, in addition to the gameplay that you would play on particular things of consoles. Now, as we saw with the large Final Fantasy 15 launch, there was manga, anime, a full CG movie, and everything else, including even the drinks, that interacted with the main story itself of the games. So it's just basically something that would be all put together. So stuff that you could actually have inside the visual novel that you could play on a mobile would be additional kinds of story content, and because of the interactivity of accounts, which you could also obviously create and log in with to the phone, either via social or things such as PlayStation Network, etc., it would allow cross. So that content that you could actually do within the visual novel of a mobile game could actually cross into the larger kind of content of a much larger console title. That would be not easy to play on a phone, but it could be the kind of interactive transmedia content that would go between the two. So what you would do in one game would obviously affect decisions and as well as interactions in another game. So you have the visual novel basically being another aspect of the storytelling and its whole game for the larger game. That's obviously a more active kind of game. So that's one of the interesting aspects where you see with the kind of different developments. Also, as we've seen with the development on the games, there's this obviously all the same challenges for creating the release on mobile, but with, like I said, the various revenue sources, make it easier to distribute across the larger apps, the app and play stores and everything like that to get more people interested in the particular content. And as you can have the resources and build, you can have like stories that connect across even multiple releases of visual novels from like one company or another, and that these things too, because if you have like cross interaction, login, etc., you can have very nice interconnected stories that could all exist on your phone. So technically you could have multiple visual novels all being played at once that would all have interconnecting storylines as well as interaction, all existing across your phone. So you can have like one story that would interact with another and then interact with another, and then you have a very interesting cross-branching kind of storylines. Now, the only real cross that might not happen is anything that has to do with certain cases, if it was more like erotic content or stuff like that, that occurs within certain visual novels because of some of the restrictions on app stores and pertains to the content. Now, as that's been noted, there has been some difficulty with getting these things for paying for content with PayPal and stuff like that. However, with certain things, if things can happen as a result of in-app purchases, even if it's not explicit, there's certain particular things that can be happen as long as everything's like rated across the right system. There is a little more of legal and content things that obviously get reviewed by the app stores, but it is something that can happen, and that's if you just do it across the main app store as opposed to third-party methods or side loading as you would do for like APK testing or stuff like that on Android. So one of the other things is, like I said, because of the cross that you would have with phones and with larger games, is what other kinds of things that could be a kind of cross promo with the visual novel. Now, I brought up with like interacting with the even drinks. So even if particular things are tied in, this is obviously something that would be more for like a larger publisher as opposed to smaller. There's been plenty of discussion on, but this kind of thing where it would be what you interact with will have effects on the particulars of the game. Everything from types of photos you would take, location check it, or something like that. Things that are still would be considered as massively active, or like I said, active as in button smashing, tons of different things you'd have to do active and that nature, but just stuff that would actually turn into various different kinds of content for the interaction with the kind of people you would do. Such as like if you were going to do something of a legal drama, such as like an Ace Attorney, if you actually went to like different things or checked in with like a law library or something as a location, that could actually have an impact on like the research or something that would be happening in the game for something that could happen, such as they would be checking in on a particular thing that the characters themselves, and then interactions accordingly. So it would be one of those massively kind of branching storylines that would be based off lots of location services and making different things happen. So, next up with that is figuring out some of the different kind of styles that actually would happen, and obviously it's very large. You can have things that are actually happening across the the real world or just adapted, or it can have like things like I said with AR that would adapt into like subworlds or see things that are there, which would actually be very useful for certain kinds of horror or fantasy or stuff like that, because it would be an additional kind of thing that you could see, such as if the characters in the game like were seeing something, you could also see the kind of things they would see in their world using the AR kind of lens to actively participate in the particulars of what would be seen. Now, and since it would also be on mobile, it allows for other different kind of easily updates. Now, obviously, the update factor doesn't matter as much now as it did a longer time ago, where it would be only like one set game. But because of the way things are updated, and they're updated pretty much continuously, as we know with games now, we can always have like new and fresh content, easy bug fixes, stuff like that could easily be delivered to you without having to be in the particular set locations or stuff like that, or pretty much a lot of the things that are based on consoles where you would have to like download gigs and gigs of a patch or day zero or anything just for content. Usually the content is usually small enough to be done within, depending on your provider and usual net speed, of course, just only a few minutes so that you can get back into the particulars of the game. So that's another thing with mobile in and of itself, is that since it would be technically a smaller kinds of files, there's usually less of a way to do the particular things because of the nature of the device. And of course, this doesn't restrict the growth of actual visual novels on other particular systems. So, like I mentioned, that Switch is a mix of a system that's not only would be considered a mobile, but also kind of a console system, is that you can basically play and continue to play based on the space and the load and everything. Now, we'll learn more about the Switch as things come out, and obviously more dev is made on that. And then it becomes really the same, that would be a lot for the same visual novels, is how to just basically get people interested in the content and everything, but just make it so that you'd only have to have a few different things, such as obviously touch-enabled interfaces, everything like that. But that's part of like standard dev for any application on mobiles themselves. So that's some of the biggest exciting things, is the kind of interaction that it can have with other types of external sensors, as well as what you would be interacting with, and then obviously how it can plug into other things across other mediums. So I say that's where some of the most interesting part of visual novels are in the age of mobile. So I got a few minutes for questions, so let's see what's here.
Cool. All right, guys, if you got questions, throw them in there. Let's see. I had one and then I like kind of just lost it. What happened? Give me a second. So a lot of what you've been saying has in changing from going from the mobile into the mobile platform is essentially like getting out of your chair. If I had to sum this up, right? Because like, you know, it used to be you're at the computer, right? Now you're not. You're on a device. You could be anywhere. You can essentially do anything with it. How close do you think we are to this?
Well, it's all a matter of people actually making it, because we've already seen that all the technologies for it pretty much actually exist, don't they? Mm-hmm. Like I said, with Pokemon Go, there's obviously the AR and location components. So obviously the Pokemon interact with you across for particular things. If that's how it can interact with the visual novel itself. It's simply a matter of gameplay and methods versus input methods. So as Ren, as you're asking, at what point does the location-based mechanics stop being a visual novel? There's a good question on that, because it depends, because you really got to get into what the concept of like the visual novel goes. So as most people may agree that visual novels it's a kind of, that's why I said not obviously crazy active gameplay where you have to do a lot of active things with it, such as I would say active is obviously capturing tons of Pokemon as you go, or having to interact with everything or Pokestops while you're the passenger of a car. Yes, and then you can see there's the visual novel where the character can send you a message or call you or etc. And that's obviously like Mystic Messenger. Now, obviously, selling a game on mobile, that's one of the things with marketing and what people want to buy and etc. So this is also where like the microtransactions come in. And obviously, if you're now, we take a look at the games that are available on mobile. Now, obviously, Square Enix games are like $15 a shot, but you know what you're getting with obviously. Well, these are ported, but you know what you're getting in the Final Fantasy games, and you're getting the whole complete game. Now, even if you have like some good brands and some very well-known brands, like take a look at even it hasn't even been released on Android yet, Super Mario Run. Now, because of their high entry point cost, it actually has had a bit of a financial problem, as opposed to people who are used to getting things in sort of smaller tiers or something like that. Such as like, there's a big difference between paying $60 for all the content versus like 99 cents for unlockable. I'd say up to about 10 or 15 for like unlockable, especially as long as it doesn't super limit you, at least at first. If pretty much you can only play a demo till you unlock everything, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So XXLIEW asks, what's the thoughts of Android versus iOS platforms in terms of markets, functionality, etc.? It really doesn't make too much of a difference because it really comes into the sensors on the particular device. So that's less about the markets as opposed to what's actually available per each device. For the most part, iPhones tend to have somewhat less sensors than a lot of Android phones, but it all depends on like what the development and developers are able to take actions with versus what can actually be useful. So you can see like even with the concept of third-party accessory, you like the floor cameras obviously plug into both Android and iOS, and technically if you did something with that, you could have yet another form of interactivity on that. It's something like, oh, you could see through like the heat vision. But it depends on how people are actually going to use and interact with the code from the various inputs. It's all, in this case, a lot comes into what type of things will be able to be programmed by developers that are allowed to them by the manufacturers. So there isn't too much of a thing there, so you just follow what's in the Android spec and also in addition what's in the manufacturer's spec. But as long as it doesn't go into the concept of where you have to be super active on everything, because like I said, this is a kind of not as active but a passive yet interaction kind of gameplay, because the visual novels let you make the decisions and things pretty much stop till you make the decision. But these add the particular, having the phones and stuff, will allow people and things to be interactive with like various times and stuff like that, which is a mechanic that already does exist a little bit, like when you would log in or stuff like that. But whereas this is only a device that's pretty much on all the time.
All right, final call for questions before we get ready for the next one. So Ryuchu or Raichu, you ready to go? All right, because I'm going to hand this over to you, make
Okay.
you present.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.